Welcome back to the ThriveIN Wabash County podcast. This is a special bonus episode. Christine Floor is here in the studio with me, along with Mayor Scott Long. Welcome back, Mayor.
Good to be here.
This is for our longtime listeners. It's been about 7 months, hard to believe, but it's been about 7 months since we invited you on the first time. And obviously, we're a little limited on the amount of time that we want an episode to be. And during that first episode, we learned a lot about you, your past experience as an officer in the military, growing up. But one of the things we didn't get to talk a lot about were kind of the local politics and specifically the influence from the state level. And so we thought we'd bring you into the podcast studio and do a little bit of an educational piece. And working with you, we've kind of highlighted 5 areas that we think that there's maybe some misconceptions at times or rumors or just lack of clarity. And so we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive on 5 specific areas, and I'm looking forward to it. I come into every episode and I want to learn something from our guests.
Absolutely.
And if I'm learning something, I feel like hopefully our audience is learning, and I feel like I'm going to learn a lot in this episode.
Yeah, this is one of those times where, Mayor, you have said you're learning a lot through this new process with these legislative sessions and trying to figure out how we navigate as a community. And so I'm excited to understand better what's going on and how things impact the city of Wabash and Wabash County, but rightly so the city of Wabash.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, the government's responsibility is to protect its citizens. The city of Wabash does that, not only for the city, but also the county through police, fire, and ambulance service. That's our main goal. That is our largest budgetary expense within the city. We provide ambulance service for 2/3 of Wabash County.
Wow.
The only townships that city ambulance doesn't cover is Chester and Pleasant Township, and those are covered by Parkview out of North Manchester.
Okay.
So, you know, we got a big responsibility on that standpoint. And to the citizens of Wabash, they've become accustomed to the services that the city's provided for years.
And for an example, the amazing parks that we have.
Yeah.
The city provides, but it's really not the primary focus.
Right.
Roads. Nice to have nice, smooth roads. Again, not the primary focus. Is that safe to say? I mean, when it really comes down to it, you're here to protect the citizens.
Well, and I got to have good roads for my police and fire to travel on.
True.
So it's a direct impact on those services also. Everything within the city is intertwined. Building commissioner. You know, a lot of people don't think about that, but his job is to inspect new construction, additions to homes to ensure that they're safe and built according to the building code. And if he does an inspection and things aren't the building code, he'll put a stop work order on it. That is a protection for the citizens also. There's a reason we have a contractor's registration process within the city so that we can ensure that the contractors have the proper insurance, that they are well qualified to perform the services. And that's everything from hanging gutters to electrical work to concrete work to everything. So every function that we provide is a benefit and it's vital to our citizens.
Absolutely.
And recently we've undertaken building inspections within our zoning jurisdiction, which is in some areas outside the city limits. So, like I said, everything's intertwined.
Yeah. Well, grateful. I don't want the building I walk into to fall down.
Oh, absolutely.
And if I fall down, I want the ambulance to be able to get to me. So I get it.
Yeah, for sure.
I get it.
And they're all economically intertwined as well. If you don't have the city parks as a nice addition, and people may not want to live here, and your
Right.
buildings go empty. Like you said, they're all intertwined. What I thought we might do is get into each one of these items that we've talked about.
Sure.
I'd like to know, kind of clear up some misconceptions, talk about at the state level, the legislation that they've just wrapped up, I think, as of today that we're sitting on here recording this episode, and some of the policies that they've put into place and how it's going to affect us locally, both negatively possibly, or what the potential upsides are and what the city can do to take advantage and make sure that Wabash is leading the way. So the first item that we wanted to talk about were local income taxes. Mayor, what is one of the biggest misconceptions or, people think they know about local income taxes, but it's really not the case?
Well, I think the misconception is that the mayor sets your local income tax rate. There's actually a local income tax council at the county level. Our clerk treasurer sits on that. And in 2008, they set our local income tax rate to 2.9%. And that's where it's been for the last now 18 years. Counties surrounding us have a lower income tax rate. Now, last year, Senate Bill 1, Governor Braun came in and said, I want property tax relief for all citizens. And while we're taking away property taxes from you, and we're projected to lose $860,000 in property taxes.
And when you say we are, that's the city of Wabash.
The city.
Okay.
Just the city. I don't have the figures for the county because they have a different association that lobbies for them at the Statehouse. These figures come from the Legislative Service Agency, who does all of the calculations at the state. We're in the top 10 on this list of what we will lose as that bill was proposed in local income tax and property tax. We were number 10. It's not a top 10 list I want to be on.
No.
So we're projected to lose $3,045,737 in local income taxes.
Over the course of?
That will take effect in 2028.
Okay.
Now, that's been pushed back a year to 2029.
Okay.
So there's been, in the last year since the legislative session ended, a very groundswell of mayors going to the State House and talking to our state reps and our state senators and, just saying, hey, this isn't going to work, especially when we're at 2.9%. And that bill says the most you can implement for local income tax is 2.9%. And we've been like the third or fourth highest in the state. Cass County's at 2.95. There's a couple counties that are way up there. Hamilton County, if I remember right, and I'm going from memory, their local income tax rate was 0.062%. So population goes into that. How many people you have working that live in your county. And if you think about Hamilton County, they got Fishers, Carmel, Westfield, Noblesville as their cities. And they've grown exponentially as people migrated out of Marion County into that county to buy new homes and live. Yeah. Obviously, their property tax base is much higher also because of the density
Sure.
of homes and businesses and retail and everything like that.
Now, if I could ask a question. So we're at 2.9% here, and I don't know what our median income household income is here, but I have to imagine that when you go down towards Carmel, Westfield, the whole Hamilton County area, it's tremendously higher
Yes.
as a dollar they're bringing in. So even if they're taxing them at a lower rate, they may be taking more dollars out of.
Oh, they're definitely taking more dollars in.
Okay.
So the income tax, it's not going to raise. So you're not going to get more money taken out of your paycheck. The state tax rate dropped 0.1%. It was 3%. It'll be 2.9% for 2026.
Okay.
And they're working to lower the state income tax down to 2.8. But you've got to make that revenue up somewhere.
Absolutely.
And when, they've told us, well, you got to grow your way out of it, which is fine for Hamilton County. They don't have a problem doing that. But every rural county in the state, we fight tooth and nail to try to attract people to our community through great parks, great school systems, safe cities. But they're not coming in droves,
Hey, let's be honest. We fought tooth and nail just to stop the loss of
Yes.
population in this county.
Mm-hmm.
Not even to think about growing, especially at any kind of rate like Hamilton County has experienced over the last couple decades.
Yeah, trying to put, a bunch of gauze and stem the flow of blood is what we've worked on for the last 10 years at least.
And have done a great job accomplishing that.
Yeah.
You've worked really hard, and other leadership has worked really hard to make sure quality of life in place is safe, has quality amenities, and the amenities that we have are well taken care of. We've alluded to parks and rivers, but buildings, having a good building commissioner, make sure buildings and structures are safe, sidewalks are safe and passable. All of those pieces just to keep people from jumping ship and thinking, this place is falling apart, I want to leave. Now people feel so proud to be a part of it, they want to continue with the momentum. Those who live here feel like stakeholders.
Right. And the goal is to get your citizens to invest in their community.
Yeah.
Invest in it, be proud of it, be proud of where you live, and share the word. I talked to a lady this afternoon that now lives in Fort Wayne. Prior to that, she grew up in Los Angeles, lived in Nashville for 25 years, moved to Fort Wayne, each step being a slower pace. And she told me, she said, I want to find a small town to live in. I said, come on down.
That's right.
That's right.
She's working for state agencies. She's the rep for the lieutenant governor in the northern part of the state. And, we got people that want to come here. We've seen migration in from California, Julie Dickey, for example. Absolutely. And other folks. We've had a remote worker from New Jersey move in, buy a home. And so we're doing the right things. But then turns around and, the state, it's great that the governor wants to save people money on their property taxes. That's fine. 10% up to a max of $300. So your property taxes have to be $3,000 a year in order for you to save $300.
The max. Yeah.
The max.
Yeah.
And, I've made the comment, for $300 a year, it's 100 gallons of gasoline. Or you buy 80 gallons of gas and 3 dozen eggs, and your savings is gone.
Are you gonna really notice a 300? I won't even hit that. You
Right.
know, I live in a pretty modest home. My property taxes aren't even at that rate, so I'm not going to see the max savings of $300 at all.
So I'll give you a prime example of my property taxes. So last year I paid $1,410, and I hit the property tax caps. I hit that 1%. My assessed valuation was $141,000. For this year, it's going up $27,600, so I'm going to be at $168,600 assessment. So 1%, my taxes are going to go up from $1,410 to $1,686, and I'm still hitting the caps because the tax rate puts me at $2,279, I think, but I'm only going to pay $1,686.
Right.
So that loss right there between $2,279 and $1,686 is taxable revenue that the city won't see because of the property tax caps.
Well, I know these are all intertwined, but let's make sure that we're focusing on the local income tax and what's happening at the state level and how it's affecting us as residents, but also the city as a whole. So you mentioned that we're at 2.9% currently, and that is going to be the cap that the state has implemented.
That's what they put in the law.
Okay. So it should not affect the individual based off of what the current city or local income tax is.
Only if you got a pay raise.
Only if you got a pay raise. Okay. So from an income standpoint coming into the city, we won't see much of a difference there as far as the income for the city.
Well, we will. It's hard to explain because what they did is they said, okay, the cap's 2.9%. Dividing that up, the county gets, as the bill stands, 1.2% of that 2.9. The city gets 1.2. Fire and EMS gets 0.04. Then your other taxing entities, the library, the township, have to fight over that last 0.1%.
And so from the state level, they didn't know the difference between Marion County, which is basically all of Indianapolis, it's all city, versus Wabash County, which is minority of the city as far as land, I'm going to say.
Right.
And a lot of county. There's no distinguishing that at the state level in the way that they've written this. Okay.
So it's a blanket law. And you talk about, let's say, Allen County, Warwick County, I think is where Evansville is, where your bigger cities are. Higher population density, more workers, that income. I'll give you a prime example, Elkhart County, and I'm good friends with Mayor Dave Wood in Mishawaka. They stand to lose $25 million in revenue. He could cut every department out of his budget except police and fire, and he's still millions of dollars short. So in that sense, some of my friends are taking a big hit, and I'm like, I don't feel so bad. I'm only losing $3 million. So now what they've done, they inserted the language. It's called a cleanup bill, the Department of Local Government and Finance. And I've been tracking this bill the whole session because they inserted the language to maybe give us some relief in this bill, which turned into a 679-page bill. And it has so many things in it as a catch-all. It just passed at 4:13. It's now 4:53. I was watching it to see if it passed. Because what they're going to allow us to do is create a local task force of the auditor, a county council member, all the clerk treasurers of all the incorporated towns to form a committee and sit down and work together and say, we're going to be continuing to get the same local income tax revenue in. And we're going to let you decide how that's dispersed. So my hope is I can sit down with these folks and say, it's not broke. Let's don't fix it. Let's keep distributing the local income taxes the way we've done it for the last 16, 18 years so we don't lose. Because what we lost at 3 million plus, Wabash County gained some of that revenue. So the hope is we can say, we're getting the same revenue at the county. Let's disperse it just like we have. And tell the state this is what we're going to do.
Right.
That's why I had a little bit more of a smile on my face, because honestly, I've lost a lot of sleep over this in the last year. It's, I don't just come into the office and do things willy-nilly. I'm thinking about this constantly.
Well, you care because not only does it affect you personally, you worked as a civil servant on the police force for so many years. These are your neighbors, they're your friends. You've been in every community in the city of Wabash and beyond. You see the impacts that this can have and how it can tie a local government's hands to continue to be effective.
Yeah, how do we continue to grow? Now, we're fortunate that we've got a lot of development happening right now.
Yes, you do.
JJ's is going to build a travel plaza at 13 and 24. We've got a new BP station going at Cass and Harrison. We're going to have a Jimmy John's break ground here soon. We've got a gas station that's going to take over the Penguin Point, tear that building down and put a new convenience store and gas station over there.
Ford meter box expansion.
We are constantly talking to new business and industry to come into this community. And hopefully in the next 3 months, we'll have a big announcement on some jobs coming in, new industry. And Tennille Zartman and I continue to drive that. We'll be traveling to an event called Select USA. We've been going up there I've been going 4 years. Girl Wabash County's been there 6.
Yeah.
So the Secretary of Commerce puts this event on outside of Washington, D.C. All the foreign companies that want to locate in the United States come here. Nearly every state's represented. We had our own booth the last few years, is right beside Northeast Indiana. This year, we're all going to be in the state booth.
Cool.
So it's going to be one-stop shop. We'll be able to hit a lot more people that way, we think. And that's what we do. We're going to take 3 days. We go the May 3rd to the 6th. Try to drive some business in here.
Well, you and Tennille with Wabash County have been hustling hard and it's not a one and done deal. You have to build relationship with these prospects to get them to this point. And you're right, our community is lucky to start to see this investment, but you started this work, 1, 2, 3, years prior. And then you and Tennille with Wabash County continue to work those relationships to finally come to a place where, yes, we are lucky that we have this investment coming in that will hopefully lead to more growth. Luckily, you and she had the foresight to continue. I mean, that's her role, and I know she works hard at it to land this to put us in a better position for what we're facing right now.
Well, one of the things when I took office, I was like, kind of my tagline's been introducing Wabash to the world and the world to Wabash. Yeah. I've seen other mayors who sit back and wait for somebody to knock on their door. My whole premise is to take the door to them.
That's right. Thank you.
And not wait for them to come here. Let's go and talk to them. And we've been to Germany. We've been to Italy. We've been to Japan multiple times. And each one of these countries do business in a different way. Japanese business is very pragmatic. They take their time. They want to make sure they're going to be successful immediately. So that's why they take their time. And you have to understand in our roles how to handle each of these countries. Europeans want to build quickly, so we may see something develop. You know, we've had German investment. CFC Distributing was purchased by Granite Parts in Germany. And that's a totally different mindset of that business now. Kallenborn Abersist and Urbana is a German company. Intertech Products in Manchester used to be Japanese owned and was purchased locally.
But all of those relationships you just talk about, we see out there on people on social media and other platforms wanting to know why we don't have large manufacturing. Well, that doesn't just happen overnight. It takes relationship. And like you said, you are doing everything you can with our economic development office and then some, right? You aren't just waiting till you hear and then, oh, well, this place might, you're going and seeking and searching on multiple fronts in multiple countries with multiple cultures to navigate in order to make us primed and ready for that relationship to provide something. And that's what you're seeing now start to come through the pipeline, right? If I'm hearing you. Yeah.
Yeah. So once Ford Meter Box bought 90 acres in the business park, that shrunk the available land that we had. So we started looking and had the opportunity to buy 232 acres at the Wedcore Industrial Park. So between 115 and where Living Essentials is currently, just to prep ourselves to be ready when a business came. And lo and behold, within a year, we got an option to purchase 155 of that 232 acres.
Yeah.
So we're probably going to be looking for more land because there's only going to be 77 acres left, and that could be snatched up quickly.
Good. We want it to be snatched up quickly.
Yeah. And so sitting in this chair, we're looking 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Because if you don't, you're going to dry up and blow away.
Sure.
You have to be prepared. And we've had site selectors come in, and Duke Energy runs a great program on certified sites. And they were in last year, looked at the site at Wedcore and said, yeah, this is the prime, but we're going to look at other areas where you need to go next. So we've always got that on the forefront also. And that's how we grow, and that relieves some of the tax burden off of our citizens as these factories come in. You get a huge assessed valuation off their land and buildings, which makes it easier for the homeowner. We don't have to. The misconception, and I think people don't realize, they understand that at home you're paying more for consumable goods. Inflation's got every price jacked up. Well, hey, guess what? The city has to buy those consumable goods, and we don't get a discount.
Right.
My office supplies have gone up 55% in the last 4 years. Yeah. You know, I went back and I looked, and I'm like, okay, what do we spend on pens and paper and computer?
Toilet tissue, right?
Paper
hand soap,
towels.
yeah. The necessities.
Yeah. So we make every effort to shop local
Yep,
for those supplies.
we do too.
But I made the decision this year, if we can see a substantial savings by going to an Amazon or a Walmart, I've got to do it because I have to save those tax dollars for my citizens. So we're constantly looking for the best available deal to try to save money.
Yeah.
We're in the process right now. We're spending $3 million to put solar on our facilities, the street department, the fire department, the police department, the wastewater plant. Huge capital outlay out front, but over a period of 20 years, that's going to save us $8 million, probably more than that.
Sure. Our
Because
new
I'm not
utilities.
sure if they calculated rate increases in there.
Yeah. Well, because it's never going to get less expensive for your electric bill.
No,
That's not going to go in the other direction.
absolutely not.
That's an investment in the future.
Right.
When to kind of go back and just kind of close up, because I want to make sure we talk about all the different topics, to close up on the local income tax. From a state level, they didn't necessarily affect the number of dollars that were going to be collected in the county.
Right.
But what they did do is put their thumbprint on how that can go to the city, the county, and municipalities
Townships,
in between.
towns, libraries.
Now, I don't want this, we've discussed this, we don't want this to become a political discussion.
Right.
But you're Republican mayor of Wabash,
Yes.
and we are led at the state level by Republicans that are moving this in this direction.
Yes.
How is this an overarching theme that at the state level they have wanted a little more control, or a lot more control in your opinion, I guess, or somebody's opinion, over the local municipalities?
Not only from a tax perspective, but there was a bill this year on land use, planning, zoning that we had to fight really hard to get in a good place also, because what the proposal was to take a class of ag land, take control out of the locals' hands so there would be no plan commission meeting for somebody to put a data center on ag land. No public input, which your plan commissions and your board of zoning appeals, we have those meetings so that the public can come in and voice their opposition, or maybe not their opposition. Yeah, we think this is great. What they were trying to do was to eliminate all that and have the state dictate where these facilities could go.
I'm on the city plan commission here in Wabash, and we just spent the last probably 14 months coming up with a solar ordinance or just to recommend the solar ordinance to the city council. And our public came out in force and let their opinions be known. And in this community, the majority of the people that we heard from were not in favor of big solar. And in talking and having those discussions, also data centers was brought up.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain areas of this state that they're welcome in,
Yep.
but in this area, they're not. And it seems frustrating that from the state level, they could dictate how we were going to allow or not allow a data center or solar or wind or whatever that might be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
These are the stakeholders here that have to live with those decisions. And I'm glad to hear that not only our planning commission and our city leadership, you, Mayor, want those voices to be heard. You know, they should be that we the people for the people, you know. And so I'm really glad that you made that point, Adam, is taking that away is taking away the voice of the people who it will affect.
Right. There's another side of that coin, though, that I struggle with. And if I'm a landowner and I want to take my land and I want to sell it, but my neighbor doesn't want me to do that, I don't think my neighbor should be able to dictate what I do with my land.
Yeah.
that's a real rub with me.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
I think when they were, they were discussing the large solar projects south of town, there were some, I may get chastised for this, but I'm going to share my opinion. There were neighbors who weren't going to be able to partake in the gravy train, and they were upset about that. Okay, well, it is what it is. There are so many sides to these discussions, and when you talk about data centers, the thing that, and I brought this up at the council meeting the other night, somebody was there opposed to data centers, and I said, it's ironic that people get on social media and complain about data centers and solar and all this stuff, but if it wasn't for data centers, you couldn't be on social media voicing your opinion because that all goes through these data centers.
Yeah.
Now, from a Wabash County standpoint, and I made this point, I said, we do not have the power capacity in this county to support large data centers. We've got 69,000 volts. That's the max voltage in our county. Ford Meter Box is waiting because Duke has to build a substation for their new foundry facility 3 years out when they started that project. So we expect, I don't think it'll be built this year. It'll probably be next year. But Duke has what they call mobile substations that they can bring in on semi-trailers while they build the actual physical substation so that Ford Meter Box can get up and running.
But was it under House Bill 1001, this particular bill you're talking about, would have taken the impact of even having this conversation? They didn't
Right.
want the decision to be made local. At least whatever decision is made, it's decided here among the constituents that live here versus losing control of that. That would be a point of contention.
Yeah, and the state could do a backdoor deal with Duke Energy and say, hey, we need you to double your electrical capacity in Wabash County so that we can locate a data center there. And then, Duke has to build that out. Who do they pass that on to?
Yeah.
The current consumers.
Right.
So
where does that part of the bill stand as of today?
I think it passed yesterday with several amendments, and I think the land use and the state dictation of land use was removed from that bill. Good. I will get a full synopsis from AIM.
Okay.
I just got an email before I came up. Monday morning, they'll do a breakdown of all these bills that we had concerns with. There was another one on municipal elections that got defeated this week. It got killed, thankfully, because it said municipalities shall move to even-numbered years presidential elections. Now, the Secretary of State has come out and said it will be cheaper to hold those elections all together. Our contention is local issues lose focus if you move to a presidential election.
Correct.
Because the federal issues overtake and swallow up anything at the state or local level. And while you get a higher voter turnout during presidential elections, and that's why it costs more to hold a local election. Because the way they're figuring it is, what's the percentage of voter turnout? What's it cost to run the election? So it's $20 a vote. Where in a federal election, you get a higher voter turnout, and it drops down to $5 a vote.
Wow.
Maybe.
But what's lost in there is the messaging that's trying to come out at the local level, because you're competing on a national scale with presidential candidates and the media is being bought up as well.
Right. And this is where boots hit the ground. This is where, at the local level, this is where we get stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a lot of red tape. You know, I've been approached to run for higher office, and I'll never do it because I can affect change in the city of Wabash and Wabash County, where if I go to the state level, I can't do that. I can't see the fruits of my labor like I can here. Anyway, I'm getting off the rails here. Sorry about that.
No. Let's move on to our next kind of topic, and we're really going to tie these in together. There's two of them here. There's property tax, and then there's assessments.
Yep.
Obviously, the assessment and the property tax are highly tied together. Let's start with the property tax, and let's talk about how a property tax rate is set, and of that, where the money goes. Okay. So here in the city, what is the property tax rate that a homeowner is going to see?
So last year, the rate was $1.82 per $100 of assessed valuation. That was 2025. 2026 rate will be $1.53.
How is that set?
So we submit our budget. They take the assessments and figure out what your total assessment is. Then they divide it out.
And you say they. Is this at the state level?
Department of Local Government and Finance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're looking at if the value of property in Wabash County, and I'm just going to throw out a lowball answer here, is $1 million this year, and we know we need to generate X number of dollars, then that percentage, they figure out that whatever that percentage is of the 1 million that they need.
Yeah.
But if the next year, if your assessed value is projected to go up, and it's going to go to a 1,100,000, the percentage may actually go down, or it could
Correct.
go, or it could go up based off of what the need is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what happened this year. We dropped 29 cents per 100. That's the lowest it's been in years.
And that was due to a combination of assessed values going up and budget needs going down?
I think our budget needs, we actually raised our budget probably $300,000 from last year just because of inflationary costs that we have to pay.
Okay.
And we've made cuts through the budget. Even though we budget this amount, rarely do we spend that entire budgeted amount, which has enabled us over the years since I've been in office to increase the amount that's in our general fund. My thought's always been I want to have enough money in reserves that if the economy crashes, I can survive 6 months at least, if not more.
Sure. That should be a standard business practice
Yeah.
for not only our city. I'm glad you think that way, but every nonprofit, for-profit should, and household, if you are able, should have that reserve if
Right.
at all possible. That should be the goal, to be able to have that, because you never know when that could happen, for sure.
To kind of weather the storm.
Yep.
You know, budgets and the economy are exactly like a storm. You never know when that blizzard's going to hit.
Anybody listening should consider that amazing fiscal responsibility on behalf of leadership, period. Having that reserve is fiscal responsibility for the people you're responsible for. And in the nonprofit that I'm the executive director of, the same thing. There's a fiscal responsibility in that. So I am appreciative of that, Mayor.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, you know, and people will sit there and say, well, you've got this much money in the general fund. You should give some of that back to the taxpayers. Well, I could do that. But then if the storm hits and I can't pick your garbage up.
Or send that police force out because you've had to reduce that force.
Right.
You know, or cut down to one snowplow. I mean, you're thinking ahead. The price of salt gets jacked up and you need to lay it down. Absolutely. And COVID was a time, it wasn't a disaster, but it was close, where organizations were really struggling in sales and every market across the country and across the globe more starting to dip into those reserves, and glad that they had them at that time, you know?
Yeah, and from rural Wabash County and the city standpoint, we created funds to help those small businesses weather that storm. Now, the money came from the federal government
Right.
down to us, but I made it a point to make sure the not-for-profits survived because they help the grassroots,
That's right.
everyday citizen. And when something like that happens, we learned a lot really quick on how we could support everybody within this community,
And you
be
did.
it a for-profit business or a not-for-profit.
Right.
So,
Those reserves don't mean that you have a yacht sitting out at one of the
yeah, there's-
reservoirs that you're tooling around in, you know.
it's not a slush fund, and
right.
we actually took some of our reserves and invested it at the state where we're making more money than we can locally on it.
For sure. With
And
the
that
interest
just rolls over to support our bottom line.
and the people. At
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's the people. It's always
Absolutely.
about the people.
So that property tax that we talk about, and then changes at the state level, what changes has happened in the state legislation that will affect property taxes that the homeowners will see, but also the income limits or changes that you may see at the city level?
Well, we can go back to, I talked about the local income tax being set in 2008. 2008, 2010 was where we had the constitutional question on the ballot for property tax caps, 1%, 2%, and 3%. So basically, when you look at assessed valuation and you take the calculation of your total tax liability from a county level, ours is just one part of that on your property tax. The county takes part, the schools take a big chunk, townships and libraries. Those are your taxing entities. And everybody gets a piece of the pie. So when you hit that 1% cap or 2% or 3%, anything above that is deemed revenue that you should be getting, but we don't see. So our certified net assessed valuation times the tax rate, and then you figure in the caps, there's a bunch of money that's not collected that you should have been able to collect had they not put those property tax caps in place. So you have to deal with that too. I mean, we lost somewhere around $1.4 million to the caps last year. So that's revenue we didn't receive that had those not been in place, we would have had it.
Right.
That's one fire truck.
I was going to reference that earlier. I know in our first episode that we had with you, you talked about the cost of a fire truck, and we had no idea that that's how much one fire truck cost a community, and we're glad you have them.
So when I took office, ambulances were somewhere around $250,000 for a new ambulance. Those are $450,000 now.
Yeah.
So we're looking at, I've talked to the fire chief. He came to me and he says, hey, I think we can take our old ambulance, take the ambulance box off of it, just buy a new chassis, mount the box on it, and we'll save $120,000. So those are things that we're looking at. Where can we save? Mm-hmm. We're running, dump trucks and pickup trucks, extra years and extra miles. There comes a point, just like in your home life, where a vehicle costs you more to keep through maintenance and everything than it does to go out and buy a new one. And we have to look at that too.
Absolutely.
Dump truck, 1-ton dump truck that street department buys fully outfitted, $140,000. Police cars are $60,000.
Oh, those are cheap compared.
Yeah, comparatively.
People are thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to save so much on my property tax this year. And yet, you kind of hit at high level, but it's really not a significant amount to the individual.
Right.
But collectively is a harder hit on the city's revenue stream, correct?
800 plus thousand.
And which means some of the amenities and services will have to be reduced.
Possibly.
You can't go put $20 bills on the copy machine and make more. They frown on that, I think.
Yeah. Secret Service may show up on
They
that.
may.
Yeah.
So what does that look like for you who I might think, yeah, I'm going to save $300. And in the end, what does it actually look like for the city?
Well, my first thought, we've never charged for garbage pickup.
No?
Every community around us, including Peru, Huntington, and North Manchester, charges their residents. I think Manchester told me it's $19.70 a month for them. Peru and Huntington's $20 a month. So I took my taxes, for example. Okay, let's say I'm paying $1,500. I save 10%, $150. If I have to charge $20 a month for garbage pickup, I'm a net loss of $90 out of pocket right there.
Right.
What other amenities or services does the city provide that we could do without?
Well, you do cleanup days. I mean, twice a year, and then you eat the cost of disposing all that waste twice a year for city cleanup or spring and fall cleanup days.
Spring and fall cleanup.
I'm imagining that service that you provide to your residents isn't something that's expected across the state and other communities. I think that's a rarity that you have provided here for years.
Yeah, some of the other cities around us sell stickers. So you go to City Hall, you pay $5 or $10 for a sticker. You got a couch you want to get rid of. You move it to the curb. You put that sticker on it. And once a month, they come around and pick it up. Does that cover the cost? Probably not.
No.
Because the tipping fees at the landfill continue to go up.
Sure.
And we have to pay that. Mm-hmm. Every ton we take out there, we have to pay. So, we're sitting here thinking, what can we do without? Mm-hmm. Because hopefully we don't have to get to that point with this House Bill 1210.
That made you smile today.
79 pages. I'm hoping we can balance out this lit revenue. So then, okay, if we do that, we're only losing $800 and some $1,000 in property tax. Can we make that up with the new gas stations and the taxes they're going to pay? And that's an easier pill to swallow than losing over $3 million in revenue.
Sure.
Through the other portion of that. Now, so our tax rate's dropping 29 cents, and that's roughly 19% reduction. Assessed values are going up. I have no control over that. Absolutely none. And I'm going to get blasted. I know it.
Not after they listen to this podcast, because it's going to educate everybody.
Well, but you also, I own my home.
Yeah.
I want those assessed values to go up.
Me too.
That means that my investment
Correct.
in my home is on the rise.
Right.
And our city status is on the rise.
That's right.
I agree.
So
we're doing the right things if our value of what we own continues to go up. I know that's shocking sometimes, and I don't understand how they do it, but that's an indicator. If you're looking at an indicator on how is the city of Wabash doing compared to others, your value is increasing. That's positive. That means the quality of life place in the indicator of where the city of Wabash is landing is also the values increasing. Is that a good basic understanding of what that can indicate for the city of Wabash? When they start to plummet and go down, we could be in dire straits. Like, that doesn't mean good things.
That's when you try to sell your home because you want to downsize or want to move and nobody's going to buy your home. That's not good.
That's not good.
Mayor, I'm curious that, the state has put their thumbprint on local income tax, property tax.
Yeah.
Number one, why do you feel like they're doing this? And number two, have they given you any recourse to make up this loss of income elsewhere?
Why they're doing it? To take away local control. Every mayor in the state believes that. The issue is, what's good for Hamilton and Marion County and St. Joe County and Allen County isn't good for Wabash, Miami, Huntington, DuBois County down south, some of those southern counties that have even less population than Wabash County does. We're making laws and creating laws that blanket everybody. There may be two bad actors in the state that are frivolously spending taxpayer dollars. So let's create a law to punish them. The unintended consequence is Wabash gets punished. Even though we're being frugal and we're looking for savings and we're trying to build our reserves so that we can survive a storm, that's my biggest complaint. I'm a registered Republican, but I watched amendments on a lot of these bills at Statehouse that were brought by Democrats. And you want to talk about partisan politics. In the Senate, the votes were 39-9 because there were two people not voting, one Democrat and one Republican. But it was 9 Democrats voting against bills, 39 Republicans voting for them, and you could just see it. And it's frustrating because some of these amendments that they brought were common sense. And I'm sitting there going, that makes perfect sense. They should do that. But because of the supermajority, they're like, nope, we're not doing it. What was the second part of your question?
I don't know that it was it mine? I think it was Adam's.
What have they given you in the way of making up for some of this lost income?
Grow your way out of it.
That's it.
That's the answer. Yeah, I once had somebody, we were talking about one of the offices, federal offices for the state of Indiana said, well, would you like to give part of your innkeeper's tax to a different state agency? And I said, well, no. Why would we do that? And they said, well, you'll just have to have more people just come stay the night. You just got to have more. And I said, our innkeeper's tax is 5%. That's a nickel on the dollar. You don't just make that up in piles and piles. You get maybe $5 an overnight stay. It's work to build tourism, and it's important, and it's impactful, and it's good for the Wabash County. But don't ask to reallocate more local dollars for more state agencies because the budget's been cut. So it's shocking sometimes to me. They want you to grow your way through it.
I'd look at them and say, how many times have you come to Wabash and spent the night?
Oh, my. Well, I need
Are you going to pay your fair share?
Yeah, and you need to stay like 4,000 times more for me to make up that nickel on the dollar, It is disheartening when Wabash County and the city of Wabash have been such great stewards of their funds, and to see this control try to be taken away from the local decision makers.
So when they passed that law last year, to get to your point, they told everybody you can offset some of these revenues by increasing your income tax to make it up. And I raised my hand and I'm like, I'm at the cap.
Yeah.
That's when they said you got to grow your way out of it.
When the entire country's fighting for population loss, rural America's struggling. I mean, we've got some great wins coming in with investments, But you're pitting people now against each other.
Right.
You're pitting communities for population migration against each other.
Well, and to that point, there was an announcement just made. Huntington landed a Korean company that's going to employ 200 to 300 people. Where are they going to get them from?
Sure.
So now we're fighting over employees.
Absolutely.
And if that company comes in and offers a higher wage than the companies here, I don't fault anybody for trying to improve their position in life.
Oh.
Yeah. For a 30-minute drive.
30-minute drive, and you make now, and I will say this, and I've said it to some of my firemen that have left for other fire departments because they were going to make $5,000 more a year or whatever. I said, well, grass is always greener on the other side of the fence until you step in the fertilizer that made it green. Remember that, because you're going to pay more out of pocket for health care and other things that the city takes care of. We just doubled this year what I had my employees pay for health and insurance. Mm-hmm. We hadn't raised it for years, and those costs, typically, we're lucky. Ours have only gone up between 1% and 3% for the last 10 years, but that adds up over time.
Yeah.
The other thing that this brings up to into mind is that we aren't just working to bring and increase our manufacturing jobs here. There's a diverse group of people trying to increase tourism.
Absolutely.
Because that is an industry. People can live here, help our property tax revenue, but work outside of this area because we want to be a diverse community
Right.
of employment opportunities, whether that's outdoor recreation and tourism. So it's okay. And it's one thing that I have seen a lot of is collaboration, especially in this Northeast Indiana. That plant that you're talking about in Huntington is coming because of the battery plant that's in Kokomo.
Right.
And so we can all grow together if we're
Right.
if we're working in what we like to say here on the podcast is we're all in the boat rowing in the same direction.
Right.
So that plant in Huntington can benefit us. It can bring residents here. But if you're looking at it in another way, is it could take some of our workforce, and that could be bad for our employers. So there's no easy answer for any of this.
No. The other side of that is, too, can some of our local companies supply that plant?
That's right.
Kendall Electric, Schlemmer Brothers,
Oh, sure.
Places, Wabash Welding Services. There's always collateral business from a new company locating. I talked to the mayor of Huntington about this morning because I just read a report earlier this month that Stellantis is trying to get out of that deal with Samsung in Kokomo. So it'll be solely, if it's accomplished, Samsung owned. Electric vehicles aren't selling. Now we've had an administration change where the previous federal administration was big on EVs. This administration, not so much. How does that bode for that plant in Kokomo? Likewise, how does that bode for this new plant coming to Huntington? Mm-hmm. Is that going to be a viable enterprise well into the future? Mm-hmm. The mayor told me, he said, we've got clawbacks within the agreement that they've made with this company. And that's something that we've done here locally. It's great you're locating here, but if you leave within a certain period of time and we're giving you a tax abatement, I want you to pay that back. Mm-hmm. If you leave within whatever. We've even done that with employees, firemen and policemen. We train you, we buy your gear. If you leave within the first 3 years, we're going to prorate those expenses for training because that's that next department doesn't have to pay to train you.
Yeah.
And we have them sign that now, because it's a huge expense.
An investment. You're investing in them. Yeah,
absolutely.
for sure. You were talking about the dichotomy of it could be good, it could be bad, it could be good, it could be bad. And I think that the diversification you alluded to, Adam, and Mayor, you've had a heart for in your leadership is that diversified workforce and workforce attraction. So whether it's staffing at Parkview Wabash Hospital or manufacturing and or small business investment like Alley Cat Outfitters, who may only employ 1 or 2 or 3 people, that diversified workforce, certification, skilled, degreed, like I said, welding, whatever those certifications are, balances a community safety because, one of our major employers, we all remember when GDX closed in 2008 and almost at that point felt like it decimated the city for a while because the population moved and relocated to their plant that was still open and then left you with a big mess of this brownfield that you're trying to clean up. And so having that workforce and employment table stable allows for the city of Wabash to weather when we're not just dependent on manufacturing and then inevitably luckily we have some family owned that haven't closed, but inevitably those large manufacturers move out and relocate somewhere cheaper in 10 years. Yeah. I mean, that just is the cycle of large-scale manufacturing. And kudos to the city of Wabash for the ones that we have retained for so many years. Ford Meter Box, B. Walter and Company, Paperworks Industries, Wabash Castings, and 5 Hour Energy. I'm sure there's a few handful, but those are our bigger employers that have weathered almost past that 10-year mark because most of the time it's 10 years and they've moved on to find a cheaper place to produce their widgets.
GDX was a great example. I think a lot of the auto industry has had major impacts across this country.
Yes.
Detroit is a massive example, but we felt that even locally in Kokomo when they lost, plants, it can have a devastating impact on income, revenue. Businesses have to close down, like you said. So I do think that Wabash is positioned well, and not just Wabash City, but Wabash County as diversified employers. So I think we're doing a lot of right things.
Yeah. So they need to keep some of those decisions local because you're all doing a great job steering that ship and keeping it balanced and stable.
Well, I think one of the, as I look back on the GDX closure, we did not have the industry to absorb those jobs.
Right.
At that time. We had a lot of business at that time that was tied to the automotive industry.
Yeah.
Too many. So the goal was to diversify. Most people don't know that Wabash ranks number 3 in aluminum production in the United States, behind Los Angeles County, California, and Cook County, Illinois. Then it's Wabash for aluminum production. And that's only going to get better. Real Alloy we just 2 weeks ago were notified that the Department of Energy grant that we thought was in jeopardy has been approved for a zero waste salt slag facility. So we're going to keep more stuff out of the landfill, which is a process of the aluminum smelting industry, all the dross that comes off that. They're going to recycle it and create several products that they can sell out of that. We've been working on that for over 2 years. I made a couple of trips to when I was up at Select USA. I stayed an extra day and went to Senator Banks, Senator Young, and Senator Yocum's office with letters that I hand carried on how vitally important it was for that Department of Energy grant to go through for our community. And I'm thankful that Real Alloy wants to invest in Wabash and create this facility to create more jobs. It may not be many, but, we're going to create more jobs. And that's the goal.
That's the goal.
The last item that we wanted to talk about, kind of a combination here of growth
Yep.
and some people's opposition to growth, but then also tie into that some housing as well.
Yeah.
We know that there's a lot of people working to move Wabash and Wabash County ahead. But like you said, these aren't fast projects. These are decades-long projects and sometimes. But talk to us about what people can do, what citizens can do to help move Wabash County ahead, and what opposition, how that can affect us negatively.
Well, the big thing is don't be so negative. You know, if one of my real concerns is if somebody Googles Wabash and they bring up a social media post where somebody's talking negatively about Wabash, is that business owner who's thinking about locating here, does that pop up on his page? And he's like, I don't know if I want to locate my company there.
Right.
Just because you got upset because the pothole in front of your house didn't get filled in 10 minutes after you notified the city, that's negative connotations on social media can have a real impact and nobody thinks about that.
Absolutely.
You know, we've had people go on social media or call in and say, grow Wabash County. We don't want to grow. Well, you're one person. Understand that growth benefits you. As I've said, if we build these new facilities and we raise our tax base, that's less that we're dependent on you and your taxes
Right.
to get things done.
And if you're going to attract these businesses and we're going to grow our population, they have to have a place to live.
Yeah.
You know, and so the investment in housing opportunities that you've been working on with the Wabash County Development Corporation, Grow Wabash County, in order to have a place for the people who are going to need to live or others that are ready to buy something different, open up current existing housing. You have to do both at the same time. And then where my office comes in is then we're marketing to get the people to move here so they know
Right.
about the jobs and the houses. I mean, you can't just do one thing. Again, back to the decision makers and the leadership here, it has to be balanced. And I can see why you don't sleep at night sometimes, Mayor, because you don't get the luxury of saying, okay, I'm going to work just on this one project. It's, I've got to move housing forward. I've got to move manufacturing forward. I've got to get people to move here. I have to take care of my roads. I've got to make sure that I have a police force. I have to make sure that we've got ambulances. And I mean, you have to balance moving it all. I think of spinning plates, right? You have to keep all the plates spinning to make it work, to make it a balanced operation. And even though it's not fast, it's not a quick fix, it takes years. And the housing piece of it is coming, whether people on social media or in this community, if you have a misunderstanding, reach out and get the correct information.
Right.
Nobody's hiding it from you. It's not top secret. Anyone is willing to be open and share why and how.
Please call me and let me confuse you with facts. Well, let's dispel one thing right now. So the former hospital site has never been in the hands of the city of Wabash.
Yes, correct. I knew that.
So Parkview,
But others didn't know that. I know that.
Right.
Yeah.
Parkview transferred that land to a group called High Performance Government out of Fort Wayne, who is acting as the developer. We have applied for Ready One money to put the streets and the infrastructure, the storm pipes and everything in through the IEDC. There again, that contract went from the IEDC to the Regional Development Authority in Fort Wayne, and a sub-grant agreement was signed between the RDA and high-performance government.
Okay.
So that money didn't flow through the city, but it was $2.4 million to get all that accomplished and get the electric and the fiber optics and everything there so that houses can connect. We're working on Fulton Street to build 100 market-rate riverfront apartments. We have a developer lined up out of Indianapolis that's going to do this. They received $3.6 million in blight elimination money. There is a small spot of lead contamination on that site that the state's going to clean up, but that's federal money. So they got the grant agreement to clean that up, all completed, and the government shut down. Mm-hmm. So it sat, and the government opened back up. Well, it took 2 months for it to get back in the pipeline. Yeah. The paperwork's setting at the EPA right now, awaiting signature. So hopefully we'll be able to get that cleaned up and break ground. I filled out some paperwork with the environmental consultant, answered some questions that they had today. GDX site, we're going to build housing there, apartments and single-family homes on that 30 acres. We're waiting for IDEM at the state to release restrictive covenants on land that is not contaminated so that we can begin that process. We're getting close on the second SPOSEEP site across from Shepherd Chevrolet that's been an eyesore forever. Getting that cleaned up. All at no cost to our local residents. No tax money's being spent on that. We went after insurance money on both GDX and the SPOSEEP site, and then state funds for Fulton Street.
And not only is it at no cost to our local taxpayers, but in the end, we hope that it's generating additional income for our city.
Absolutely.
More housing. And like Christine said, you're working on so many different projects at the same time, and not just you, your entire team, they're all at different stages of where they're at. And then there are things, like you said, this government shutdown out of your control that is going to slow down a project, or the EPA has got to sign off on something. But what our listeners need to understand is that it's not just as simple as saying, I want this business, let's build it. And
right.
You have to also balance, if you're going to build all these new homes, what's that going to do to the current homeowners' property values? Right. We don't want to saturate the market. That's not good for anybody either. So there's so many things that you're balancing. So I think I'd like to bring the mayor back in, hopefully in less than 7 months from now.
We'll get him slated sooner than later.
To do some of this education and allow the listeners to kind of see behind the scenes of stuff that's going on that you're working on, that even Manchester's working on, to make this community better.
She called it spinning plates. I call it juggling Molotov cocktails. And trying not to drop one. I'll give you a prime example. First call Monday morning, Wabash County Solid Waste, where our recycling center's at, and our central dispatch. Our restrooms quit working. The lines, something's wrong with the lines. We can't use our restrooms. Try to wrap your head around taking your public safety access point where every 911 call comes in and potentially having to move that in hours. And lo and behold, who's the president of the Solid Waste Board this year?
That'd be you.
So I get the call, and I'm like, okay, call Bob Gray. I said, go make sure that our sewer mains are not the problem. Did that within 10 minutes. Nope, we're good. Okay, so it's on site. Bob, get a hold of one of our local guys that we know can do the job. Mm-hmm. Took him a day and a half to get it opened back up. We got one working So they had one restroom in the facility for both solid waste and dispatch.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, if we need to get a porta pot and put it in a warehouse so it's inside, fairly warm,
Solution findings.
until we figure out what's the issue.
Yeah.
So the contractor ended up having to go through a vent pipe on the roof, running a line down through to open this up. And then once we got it opened up, I'm like, where should we put install clean outs to make sure in the future we have access everywhere we need it? So that was Monday morning. Great way to start your week. First call.
Just one of many tasks
to
dig into.
Yeah. And then back to back meetings Monday morning. And
it's a lot to shoulder. And I know you signed up for it, and I know you've accepted it. And some days the burden feels like, wow, I can do this. And I'm sure there are some days the real truth is, man, this is a lot to carry. And what you carry that sometimes you can't even share, right?
Right.
Only Jackie, your wife, gets to hear some of this worrisome and burden because, you're carrying the weight of 10,500 people on your shoulders and departments, as well as working with your colleagues throughout the county and the other communities.
Yeah, and I don't share everything with her. I mean,
she'd probably worry about you.
That's 25 years of going from police where there were a lot of things that you don't share that you see, and that's just kind of continued on. I internalize it.
To protect her.
Yeah. Yeah, because she doesn't need to know. She's already messaged me wanting to know what time I'm going to be home. I told her what I was doing. It's going to be a while.
Yeah.
So,
well, Mayor, I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast for the second time. I want to close this by saying that I choose to look at things as in the positive.
Yeah.
And what is the opportunity here? There are some things that are happening at the state level that, as much as you may want to argue against, ultimately the decision is out of our control.
Yep.
And so when those decisions are made, what's Wabash going to do to put ourselves in the best light?
Sure.
And we're doing a lot of things. We've been doing a lot of things. And we also have to realize that every small community across the state is going to be facing the exact same challenges that we are.
Absolutely.
And what can we do to put our best foot forward? And maybe if somebody else is going to suffer, what can we do to make sure that we're going to take advantage of it?
Sure, and
right?
help.
To help Wabash move forward. So I believe that you're doing that work, that your team's doing that work. Absolutely. We need the community to buy into that. You mentioned that earlier, that one negative comment, it takes a tremendous amount of effort to bring positive from one negative. One negative review at a restaurant can decimate a restaurant. 100 positive reviews isn't necessarily going to make a difference.
Right.
But one can close it.
We
have to remember that when we're talking about our community in the same way, that somebody may be looking to move a business here or move their family here. Maybe they want to be a new teacher here. What we do online and just in the community has an impact.
Yep.
So hop in the boat, row with us.
That's right.
Doesn't mean you have to agree with everything, but you can work hard to move us forward. So in closing, Christine, do you have anything?
Lastly, I would just say I appreciate your transparency. Some politicians get a bad rep. You have from day one always been transparent. So thank you for your transparency and thank you for your heart, because you don't do this because it's easy. This is hard work. So
no,
thank you for that.
And for me to close, I would say to the citizens, you can choose to be part of the problem or part of the solution.
Every day.
I hope you choose to be part of the solution. And I'm looking at my list, Christine, and this, you'll get this. The number one town in the state that's going to lose the most, 66% of their revenue, is the town of Edinburgh.
Oh my gosh.
And you and I and a group of Wabash people a couple of years ago went down to mentor those folks. And we know what that community is. And
They've got great heart.
so hopefully this bill is going to help them out also.
We feel for you, Edinburgh.
Yes, for sure. I appreciate the time and happy to come back and we can drill down on something. And anybody that wants to get a hold of me and want to talk about your property taxes, come into the office and I'll throw it up on the computer screen and I'll show you exactly. Yeah. Even though my assessment went up 16%, the tax rate went down 19%. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to make any money. My clerk treasurer's assessment went up $100,000. And I told her, I said, it's because I paved your street. So I'll get blamed for that one too.
Thanks
Appreciate
again.
it.
Yep.
Oh, gosh.
Thanks again. Like Christine said, you've been very open. And I just want to add one quick little story in that the mayor is so accessible. It was a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I was driving down a street and I saw water pouring up out of the ground. That's not normal. And it was late in the evening and it was after work hours. And you know what? I'm going to send the mayor a text and a quick picture of what's going on here. And it was probably within 15 minutes. There were people already out there marking for the utilities. And by that evening, they had been dug up. And this was when it was extremely cold. But that's the type of mayor we have.
That's the type of city we have.
That's right.
That is not everywhere.
It's not everywhere.
And the good news, it was in a councilman's front yard.
It was. It was.
Yeah.
So that same type of teamwork and generosity and just believing in the community is really what has helped make this podcast possible too. The mayor, you stepped up.
Yep.
We've turned this closet into our studio thanks to your generosity.
Day one. He was like, yes.
Also, people like the Lisa Gilman Investment Fund and the Sandra Kunkel Trust, Mark and Amy Ford, Paperworks Industries, the Community Foundation of Wabash County, and Visit Wabash County. They really make this possible. And so thank you again for that, Mayor.
I talked to some mayors today at Mayor's Roundtable and told them I was doing a podcast. Where are you doing that at? I said, oh, City Hall. They're envious.
They should be. They should see the studio.
Yeah.
We'll have to get him in for a mayor's circle. We'll take little tours. Maybe we'll get him on an episode.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again to our listeners. Check the show notes. We'll put a link to the City of Wabash's website in there. It's a great website, and if you've got issues, stormwater, whatever it might be, a car that's broken down on the side of the road and it's been an eyesore, it's part of your neighborhood, you can report all that, and they give you a tracking reference number, and you can see where the status is at. So great resource that not every community has. But until next time, I'm Adam Stakeman.
I'm Christine Floor.
And this is ThriveIN Wabash County.